Imagine you're 16 years old, surrounded by nothing but the Pacific Ocean. No compass, no radio, no rescue aircraft searching overhead. Just 6 teenage boys drifting farther from home with every passing wave. Most stories that begin like this end in tragedy, but this one didn't, because these boys would go on to build something extraordinary on a deserted island. A community built on cooperation instead of conflict. Their true story would challenge one of the world's most famous fictional survival tales. But before they could rewrite what people believed about human nature, they first had to survive an ocean that seemed determined to swallow them whole. 8 days earlier, life looked completely different. On the island kingdom of Tonga, 6 teenage friends were far more interested in adventure than responsibility. School felt restrictive. The ocean promised freedom. Like many teenagers, they dreamed of escaping the routine, even if only for a day. So when one of them suggested borrowing a local fishing boat and sailing beyond the familiar coastline, it sounded less like a dangerous decision and more like the beginning of an unforgettable adventure. None of them could have imagined that a single choice would carry them hundreds of miles from everything they had ever known. The 6 boys had grown up together in the close-knit communities of Tonga. They shared classrooms, chores, laughter, and a restless curiosity that often pulled them toward the sea. To them, the ocean wasn't just a boundary, it was an invitation. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, an idea began to take shape. Borrow a fishing boat, sail for a while, enjoy the freedom. Then come home before anyone noticed. It sounded harmless, but history is often changed by decisions that seem ordinary in the moment. The plan seemed simple. Slip away before sunset, spend a few hours at sea, then return before anyone realized they were gone. They untied the small fishing boat, laughing as they pushed it into the gentle surf. Nothing about the evening felt dangerous. The wind was light, the sea was calm. Behind them, Tonga slowly began to shrink into the distance. Ahead lay nothing but open water, and a future none of them could possibly imagine. By nightfall, the boys understood something had changed. The ocean that had carried their excitement was now testing their survival. The wind pushed against the small boat, rain filled their eyes, and waves began crashing over the sides. They tried to stay calm, but the reality was becoming impossible to ignore. They were no longer simply exploring the sea. They were lost inside it, with no land in sight and no way to call for help. 6 teenagers faced their first true challenge, staying alive. Hour after hour, the storm refused to show any mercy. Every wave seemed determined to pull the little boat farther from home. The boys could no longer tell which direction they were drifting. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds, leaving them with no way to navigate. Exhaustion slowly replaced fear. They took turns holding on, bailing water, and encouraging one another to keep going. They still believed daylight might reveal another island or a passing fishing boat, but when the first light of morning finally appeared, all they could see was water. Endless water in every direction. When the storm finally passed, the silence was almost as frightening as the waves had been. The boys looked around, hoping to see the familiar outline of Tonga. There was nothing. Just an endless circle of sea stretching to every horizon. Their small fishing boat had drifted far from its course, and none of them knew where they were. The food they had brought was almost gone. Fresh water was running dangerously low. The excitement that had filled the boat the day before had disappeared, replaced by a question none of them wanted to ask. Were they ever going to find their way home? The first night was over, but their nightmare was only beginning. As the sun climbed higher, the Pacific became an endless blue prison. The little food they had left disappeared quickly, and every sip of fresh water had to be carefully shared. Their lips became dry, their skin burned beneath the tropical sun, and exhaustion settled into every movement. Yet no one blamed another. No one fought over the last mouthful of water. Instead, they encouraged one another, took turns watching the horizon, and refused to let hope disappear. Somewhere beyond the endless sea, they believed land still existed. They just had to survive long enough to find it. By the 5th day, time had almost lost its meaning. Sunrise and sunset blended into one another, and every hour felt longer than the last. Hunger gnawed at them constantly, while thirst became almost unbearable beneath the relentless Pacific sun. Their bodies grew weaker, but their determination did not. They spoke less, saving their strength, yet they never stopped watching the horizon. Each boy carried the same quiet hope that somewhere beyond the endless blue, land was waiting. It was a fragile hope, but it was enough to keep them alive one more day. Late on the 8th day, something broke the endless pattern of sea and sky. One of the boys froze, staring toward the western horizon. At first, he wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on his eyes. He blinked and looked again. The dark shape was still there. Quietly, he pointed into the distance. One by one, the others turned. No one spoke. The boat drifted closer with every passing minute. What had first looked like a cloud slowly sharpened into steep cliffs, rising above the ocean. For the first time in 8 days, they were looking at land. It was Atia Island, and it would soon become their only hope of survival. Finding land did not mean they were safe. As the boat drifted closer, the boys saw towering volcanic cliffs instead of a welcoming beach. Powerful waves exploded against the black rocks, sending white spray high into the air. Their small fishing boat could be smashed apart in seconds. They searched desperately for a way ashore, but every stretch of coastline looked equally dangerous. Waiting was no longer an option. Gathering what little strength they had left, they made a silent decision. They would leave the boat, face the crashing surf together, and trust one another with their lives one more time. The island was silent except for the wind moving through the trees. Weak but determined, the boys stayed together as they stepped into the dense forest. Every sound made them stop and listen. Then one of them heard something different. It was faint at first, almost hidden beneath the calls of distant birds. Water. They followed the sound through the thick vegetation until a clear stream appeared before them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then they dropped to their knees and drank deeply. After 8 days surrounded by salt water, they had finally found fresh water. Some washed the salt from their faces. Others quietly bowed their heads in gratitude. It was the first sign that Atta Island might not only test them, it might also keep them alive. With fresh water secured, survival became a daily routine instead of a desperate struggle. The boys refused to think only about today. They planned for tomorrow, working as one team. They built a shelter from branches and broad leaves that protected them from the tropical rain. They never allowed their fire to die, taking turns to keep it burning day and night. They caught fish, gathered seabirds' eggs, and even cleared a small area where they grew vegetables. They created simple rules that everyone respected. When arguments happened, they separated until they had calmed down, then returned to talk things through. On an island where many expected chaos, they built something closer to a family. Days became weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. The boys grew stronger with every sunrise. Their shelter became sturdier. Their small garden flourished. The fire they had protected from the very beginning never went out. Life on Atta Island settled into a rhythm built on discipline, trust, and shared responsibility. What had once seemed like an impossible fight for survival had become a community sustained by cooperation. Without realizing it, the 6 boys had created a society of their own. In September 1966, after more than 15 months on Atta Island, their lives changed forever. Australian fisherman Peter Warner spotted signs of life where no one expected anyone to be alive. Against all odds, the 6 boys had survived. They returned home not as victims of a tragedy, but as young men whose cooperation, discipline, and resilience had carried them through one of history's most remarkable survival stories. Their experience remains a powerful reminder that even in the hardest circumstances, people can choose to build each other up instead of falling apart.